In 1937, the Walt Disney Studio reached new heights with the successful release of Snow White. Walt Disney proved that feature-length animation was possible, and even more importantly, he knew it was going to be the future. On top of that, he had finally cleared himself of all his debt and earned some extra money. This new fortune was put towards 3 big investments that would almost bankrupt the studio. The house. Things were getting busy for the Disney clan. Work at the studio was picking up, and at home, the families were growing. With a portion of the Snow White profits, Walt and his brother Roy decided to buy a house for their parents in Southern California. The idea was simple: give their parents a comfortable place to live nearby and allow them to spend more time with their grandchildren, which also meant the convenience of having a babysitter on occasion. But this gesture came at a cost. The house they purchased had a faulty furnace. In November 1938, a gas leak would tragically take their mother. The studio. Disney was outgrowing the animation field and needed to expand. He purchased a lot in Burbank to build a new studio that could meet the company's growing demands. The studio was designed to be state-of-the-art, complete with its own art school. After all, they were pioneering a new frontier of feature animation. The company continued operations at Hyperion Avenue throughout the construction period until the Burbank studio was completed in 1940. The 3 movies. In my Snow White video, I had said, with the success of Snow White, Walt was able to pay off his entire debt and build a new studio where production on the next project began. Which, upon further research, it turns out I was somewhat wrong. Not only did Disney begin production on its next feature, but he greenlit 3 major projects at once: Bambi, Pinocchio, and Fantasia, to be released in that order. Animating realistic animals for Bambi proved to be too ambitious for the studio that they had to push it to the back of the lineup and move Pinocchio to the very front. The decision to reimagine the 19th century Italian story by Carlo Collodi came with its own challenges though. The original tale was first published as a serialized story in an Italian newspaper before being compiled into the book L'avventure di Pinocchio. Fortunately for the team at Disney, they had already pioneered the use of storyboards in Snow White, which made adapting the work fairly easy. In this early stage, Walt had a rough outline of what the story would be, but another issue arose: Pinocchio himself. The team had to figure out how to make the character more appealing. They had their drafts, but nothing was working. 6 months into production, Walt stopped everything. And that's when legendary animator Milt Kahl stepped in and flipped it on its head. Following the source material, the Disney drafts had Pinocchio being a wooden puppet and springing it into life. Kahl redesigned Pinocchio not as a sentient wooden puppet, but as a human boy with puppet-like features.
They were thinking in terms of a puppet all the time, naturally, because he was a puppet.
It really showed a Pinocchio that looked like a puppet, like really something that you would carve out of wood, very geometric shapes, very wooden looking.
And I handle it not thinking of so much as a puppet as just a little boy.
Disney took Kahl's new design requested all the animators to use it. The new locked-in design granted them the studio to finally move forward and begin the search for a voice to match, which they found in child actor Dickie Jones. Right, with Pinocchio set, time to tackle the next problem: the story. Storyboarding was fine. The issue they had was that Pinocchio as a sole protagonist was too passive and wasn't interesting enough. He needed someone to bounce off of. The missing piece of the puzzle came in a tiny package: a cricket. Jiminy was already an established character in the serial known as Il Grillo Parlante, or the Talking Cricket. He was short-lived as a wooden boy literally smashes the bug after he gave unsolicited advice like stay in school. In the Disney version, however, Walt decided to keep him to serve as a conscious through-line that guides the wooden boy to follow good morals. Disney tasked the OG Ward Kimball to design the new cricket. So apparently on Snow White, Ward Kimball had spent months working on the scene only for it to be cut from the final film. And I suppose Disney, out of guilt, gave Ward this final project so that he wouldn't quit. Once Disney approved the new design, Cliff Edwards went in to give a voice to Jiminy. The total time it took to complete the final film was about 2 years. The turnaround is insane compared to Snow White, especially considering how the quality of the animation is leagues better and a lot more complicated than the static shots of its predecessor. I mean, look at this. The movie premiered on February 7th in the Center Theater in New York and released worldwide on February 23rd, 1940. The movie bombed at the box office. It was bad. They were on a high from Snow White that the budget for Pinocchio was doubled to a whopping $2.6 million. Keep in mind that $1 million was already insane for Snow White, and this dude just said, "Watch this," and doubled it. The decision almost led the studio to complete bankruptcy. Out of the $2.6 million budget, it was only able to recuperate between $1.4 and $1.9 million. But it wasn't Disney's fault. Everyone loved Disney. But at the time, the world was too preoccupied with a world war and ticket sales plummeted, especially in the European markets. On top of that, let me remind you that Disney put money towards a house, a lot, and 3 movies simultaneously. Uh-oh, the future's not looking good. I'll cover the other 2 movies in consecutive order, so subscribe and you'll be notified when I upload those videos. Pinocchio was re-released in theaters years later after the war, to which it was finally able to claim its dues. The movie itself is 88 minutes long and it falls under the animation, adventure, comedy, family, fantasy, and musical genres. The movie critically did very well. On Letterboxd, it holds a 3.5 out of 5. IMDb users rated it at 7.5 out of 10. But things really hit it off with the critics. Over on Metacritic, it's been labeled a universal acclaim with an astonishing score of 99. On Rotten Tomatoes, the audiences give it a decent 73%, but the critics, a flawless 100%. In his writings, Roger Ebert does a play-by-play of the film's memorable moments before landing on this line where he says, "The climax is a cascade of visual imagination." He further elaborates on his show with his review ending with,
"This movie is a masterpiece of animation and of storytelling, and I think the restoration is real good looking too."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is how beautifully drawn this picture. All you have to do is look into Pinocchio, into Geppetto's wood shop, and see the clocks and the detail and the wings on the blue fairy, the level. This is a gorgeously drawn picture.
2 thumbs up for the re-release of Pinocchio in a bright and cheerful restored version.
with praise like that, it must have earned an Oscar, right? It won 2. Pinocchio won in both categories it was nominated in, which were Best Original Score and Best Original Song for When You Wish Upon a Star. That has since gone to become Disney's theme. In 1994, Pinocchio was added to the United States National Film Registry for meeting the requirements of being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Personally, I found this movie charming. What threw me off in my first time watch was the smoking and the Pleasure Island stuff. It just felt weird as a modern audience watching a Disney movie through that lens, you know? Anyways, now when you're there, consider subscribing and browse around my channel for similar content.
Pinocchio is a unique film because it followed Snow White, and you can see the confidence that the crew had after a huge hit like Snow White. They just rolled up their sleeves and said, let's just see what we can do with the next one.
We were pretty cocky coming off of Snow White. We thought we could just sit down and do another feature. We start working on sequences that were in the middle of the picture. Walt looked at it and he says, it's not working right.
What has to be